Hello, welcome to Clarity and Brevity. Today I want to give a book recommendation, which is actually a version of the New Testament. There's a new edition of the New Testament out that is a new study Bible, which is called the Connecting Scripture New Testament, right here. This uses the Christian Standard Bible translation. It's edited by G.K. Beale and Benjamin Glad. And what it is basically a study Bible that focuses on the New Testament's interactions with the Old Testament, looking both at citations or quotations and allusions. Now, this is important because when you read the Bible, you need to look at the Old Testament influence in the New Testament. The New Testament writers are constantly looking back to the Old Testament and assuming that context and integrating that language into their writings in order to make theological points. So to understand the New Testament and their theology, we need to understand the Old Testament. This is key for biblical theology as you think about the outworking of the story of redemption. And so I'm happy to recommend this resource here. Let me tell you what it does. It looks at the Old Testament, this is Mark 10, and where there are allusions or echoes, something like that, not a citation, it puts it in the text in green. So right here in Mark 10:27, with man it is impossible, but not with God, because all things are possible with God. That is Mark 10:27. And here they've put in green what is possible with God. That is related to Genesis 18:14, where all things are possible with God. So you see, this is scriptural language whenever Jesus says all things are possible with God. Sometimes these are more obvious, sometimes they're less obvious. That's in green, which they mean for this version that it's an allusion, a passing reference, or an echo, you might say, to the Old Testament. And that in the text, it is green, and it's also green in the marginal note over here. So there are a lot of references on the side that help you understand what the Old Testament passages referred to are. Keep going. He says, now this is an interesting one. In Mark 10:32, they were going on the road, and Jesus was going on ahead of them, or walking ahead of them in this translation. And that's in green, walking ahead of them. The editors here see an allusion to an Old Testament passage just in that detail that Jesus was walking ahead of them. And what they see is Exodus 23:20, which is an important passage for understanding the Exodus in the Old Testament. And if that's the case, if that is an allusion to Exodus 23:20, what you have here is one of many references to the first Exodus in the book of Mark, because Jesus in the book of Mark is leading his people in a new Exodus. And that's the Exodus as filtered through the prophets. Think of Isaiah and his theology of a coming day of redemption that would be like the first Exodus. And the way that narratives work, they don't always come out and tell you this. They show you this in the narrative. You have to read the story carefully. And so in a text like Mark, you're going to have to be very attentive to the Old Testament allusions. And at the bottom of each page, they give an explanation for how this allusion works, what it is, and how it works. Now here you have something in blue, which is a quotation. Do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, and so forth. That's in blue because it's a quotation of the Old Testament. And those are a little easier to spot than the allusions often. It's also interesting, I looked here in Revelation, and if you turn to a text like Revelation 13, there's a lot of mystery in Revelation and apocalyptic imagery. But what's interesting is how often you're going to see green, that is allusions to the Old Testament in Revelation. And this one text I turned to here, and it has a whole lot of green in Revelation 13. That helps you understand that if you're reading the book of Revelation, one of the best backgrounds, in fact the most important background, is to understand the Old Testament. And what you find is John is interacting with the Old Testament and assuming those themes and images as he makes his point in the book of Revelation. So there's much more I could say about this. This is going to be coming out in October 2025, and it'll come out in various editions. This is a hardback. There's also going to be, I think, leather versions that come out. You've got other things here like charts that show up and articles that are in here. And so this is only the New Testament. but it's a New Testament that will help you understand the whole Bible, because it's incredibly important when you're reading the New Testament to look at Old Testament references, and there's a number of great resources out there that can help you do that. This is a new one, and this seems to be a unique resource that is a study Bible that focuses on specific ways that you're going to see the interaction of the Old Testament in the New Testament. So this again is called the Connecting Scripture New Testament. The publisher is Holman Publishers. It's the Christian Standard Bible translation. And if you're interested in biblical theology and in a robust understanding of the New Testament, you may find this useful. Well, thanks for watching. Remember to keep it clear and focus on Christ.